everybody. My name is Patrice McLaurin. I am a children's book author. I have published 4 books, all centered around STEM and social emotional learning. So my first book is actually part of a series called Thank an Inventor. And this book is titled, Have You Thanked an Inventor Today? So basically it chronicles the school day of this little boy. And it highlights different inventions that he uses throughout his day that were all invented by Black people, right? And then the follow-up book to that, yes, is, yes. And then we have You Thank the Kidventor Today. So it's the second book in the series, and you guys can probably guess from the title that it talks about inventions that were invented by children, right? I tied that series up with my Thank an Inventor coloring and activity book. So this book has over 100 different activities in the book that you can use to supplement Have You Thanked an Inventor Today and Have You Thanked the Kidventor Today. And then there's my book, I Am Because I Choose. And basically this book is a social emotional learning book. It can be used to just kind of facilitate any of the core competencies of SEL. And it basically encourages children to choose good behavior. So that's me and my authorship in a nutshell.
That is wonderful. And I have to tell you, I was reading this one, your first one, Thanked an Inventor Today. I read it with my kids this morning. And then when I told them about the other one, which unfortunately I didn't have a copy of it, about the Kid Inventor, just their eyes lit up. First, they thought this was really cool because there are so many inventions in here that you don't really think of, like a pencil sharpener.
Right.
We use it all the time. Nobody thinks about who invented it, or peanut butter. You know, there's everyday things that first you don't think who's behind it, and then so exciting to find out African-American inventors that are behind it. And then when they thought about, wow, kid inventors, because what I love is you really take it beyond just teaching them the history, which is so important, but then you make them think, okay, now what are you going to invent? And I think that stuff was like, you could see them make that connection because of how you have it in the book. Like, that was really exciting for them.
Yay. I love it. I love it.
So tell us, how did you start? What was your journey to becoming an author? How did you get started writing?
So my journey actually to becoming an author is kind of rooted in activism. I do love writing, but the journey to authorship basically is rooted in activism. I consider myself what I dub as an image activist. And it's a term that I actually got from the extraordinarily talented Michaela Angela Davis. I don't know if you're familiar with her, but I actually saw the term on her Twitter feed. And when I saw it, it just resonated with me. It spoke volumes to me because I felt like it just perfectly defined my life's work, right? So I honestly don't know how she defines image activism, right? I don't know. But for me, image activism just basically involves me actively working towards debunking negative stereotypical images of Black people by highlighting Black excellence and Black normality, right? So when it comes to my journey of authorship, it was actually birthed out of trauma. It was birthed out of the trauma that is Trayvon Martin, the trauma that is Jordan Davis and Mike Brown and Tamir Rice, right? And Tamir Rice was particularly unnerving for me because, first of all, the baby was only 12 years old, right? Second of all, the baby was taken from us in 5 seconds flat. Thirdly, during that time, my baby was 12 years old, and he shared an uncanny resemblance to Tamir Rice. So after hearing that story, I knew that I had to move my feet, right? I knew that I needed to move my feet because I was under the very firm impression that part of the reason why it was so easy to take that child's life in 5 seconds flat was because the child wasn't really looked at as a child, right? The child was looked at as a threat. And part of the reason why that baby was looked at as a threat was, again, in part due to the negative stereotypical images that we see of Black people on a daily basis. And I think that we can all agree that just any disparaging caricature, right, that you can place upon a person has been placed upon Black boys and Black young men.
Right.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm thinking to myself, okay, if this is the issue, if negative media is the issue, then what can you do? Right. Oh, ding, 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 ding. Why don't you create a piece of media that interrupts that? Right.
Right.
Why don't you create a piece of media that interjects, that interrupts that pattern, and make that piece of media a children's book?
Mm-hmm.
Because the earlier that we can infuse the idea of Black humanity into the minds of our children,
mm-hmm.
the better off that we're all going to be, right? So I wrote a children's book that highlighted and humanized mm-hmm. Black boys and highlighted Black excellence, right? So that was part of my solution to the problem that was just overwhelming, and it's still overwhelming to this day. Thus, Think and Inventor was born, and now I have the distinct pleasure of sitting here talking to you.
Yeah, I just love that out of this terrible experience that you turned it into something so positive, and what a wonderful way, like you said, to really affect change is by reaching children, and also that you talk about Black excellence and Black normality. I mean, both mm-hmm. of those. I love how you phrase that, because they're both so important to, like you say, to humanize and to really change those images that we have. And when I know you also had some experiences about volunteering and really connecting with kids. Was it through Girls Inc.? I think, is that what?
Yeah, I volunteered with Girls Inc. I did that for about 4 years. In fact, the only reason why I stopped is because I was 8.5, almost 9 months pregnant with my son. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I volunteered with Girls Inc. I created and facilitated a course, if you will, on Black history. I simply entitled it like Afrocentric, and basically I just shared Black history facts. Mm-hmm. I shared with the children information about their heritage, because I felt like that was extremely important. I know that when I personally began to unpack, right, the richness and the vastness mm-hmm. that was my history, I actually became audacious enough to believe that I was limitless. Mm. Imagine that, right? So I knew that if it did that for me, it would do the same for the children in my community. So I took it upon myself to just go on out there and give them that information, right? So that's how I began.
Yeah, from there and through the books that you've written. Why do you think that is so powerful? Because like you say, it does really have that effect when people really learn their history and their heritage. Why do you think that's so powerful for children to learn that?
I mean, I just think that everybody needs to have some type of connection to their ancestry, right? It helps you to know where you come from. Mm-hmm. It helps you to know your capacity, right? One of my favorite sayings is the diameter of your knowledge equals the circumference of your activity. So in other words, you'll only know and be what it is that you know how to, you'll only do and be, rather, what it is that you know how to do and be, right? Mm-hmm. And when you're rooted in your lineage and you understand that your lineage stems from greatness, then again, it just gives you a certain level of audacity where you say, hey, I really can do this. And I'm actually audacious enough to know that I can do it. And who gonna stop me?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Who gonna stop me, boo? Right? So it's like, that's why it's important.
Right. I love that. And why specifically inventors?
Well, specifically inventors, because it's interesting, right? We just got through celebrating Dr. King. Mm-hmm. And part of the reason why I became so interested in inventors is because of Dr. King. I actually heard a clip where Dr. King said that we utilize the genius of a Black man's mind during the first 15, 20 minutes of our day, and we don't even realize it, right? And once I really digested that, I was like, wow, we really do utilize the genius of a Black man's mind during the first 15, 20 minutes of our day. Now, why is it that we don't know that, right? So to me, it's important to introduce that information to children because, in my opinion, it just kind of helps to interrupt this over-exaggerated sense of white accomplishment. Right. You know what I'm saying? Like, when we sit in the classroom, just imagine this classroom setting, right? You're in the classroom, and you're learning about the history of America, right? And in learning that history, as a white child, you're learning that history from a space of grandiosity. You're learning that history from a space of accomplishment, right? As a Black child, you're learning that history from a space of trauma. Right. You're learning that history from a space of oppression, right? So at the end of the day, once we're done teaching this history, the white child can very easily walk away with this innate sense of superiority, simply because of how he learned his history. And the Black child can very easily walk away with this innate sense of inferiority. Right. And then it doesn't just impact them, right? You have other ethnicities who might be sitting in the classroom, right? And those other ethnicities are probably omitted from the history book altogether. Right. So they're learning about their history from a space of omission because it's not being taught, right? And they too are internalizing this information. And they too will leave that classroom with an innate sense of white superiority, right? So it's important to introduce the idea that all cultures help to create this great American landscape. But I personally felt like I needed to introduce to children the idea that Black people, for the most part, are truly the ones who help to make America great, for lack of a better term, right? And it's the innovativeness and the genius of Black people that really help us to function throughout our day. And I just wanted that to be expressed. And I wanted children to know that.
Yeah, and like you say, it's so empowering to them to think of, well, if they did that, then what can I do? Like,
right.
Realizing their own capacity and their own genius. Right. So powerful. And it also relates to, everybody's so into STEM these days and teaching science, and that's such a great way to motivate kids to get involved if they have these examples. Like you say, everyday things like the hairbrush. I never thought about someone inventing the modern hairbrush. Like, it didn't even occur to me. And yet here she is, and I should say, for those that have older kids too, like I have some that are older elementary, there's some really great short biographies of all the inventors that are mentioned in the book, which is fun. I always love that because I have kids that are kind of a range of ages. So you can read younger kids and it's just like the highlights. And then if you have older ones that wanted, because we were sitting and I have 6-year-old, 9-year-old, 12-year-old, and the older ones who were like, wait, who is that? What did they do? And so we could flip it back and say, oh, well, this is who Benjamin Banneker was. And I hate to say it, but I only knew a few of the names in the book. I've heard, George Washington Carver and Benjamin Banneker. Most of the other ones I had never heard of before.
And I tell you what, I just recently heard, and his name escapes me. I feel bad about that. His name escapes me. But I just recently heard or read about a Black man, and he invented the keychain. Something as simple as that, right? But who amongst us do not have a keychain? And to think that the keychain is another invention that comes from the genius of a Black man's mind. And it's just those things that's so important to know.
And I love how you tied it into the message of Dr. King, that this is all kind of part of the same, like you said, part of the same forward movement and progress. Just to switch gears a little bit, because we've been talking about your the Inventors books, but you also have the power to choose one, which is really wonderful. Like you said, it talks about the positive benefits that comes from good choices. So can you tell us a little bit more about that one?
Well, that book is just, it's a book. Okay, I have a history. What part of my background is in character education. So I taught character education for about 3 or 4 years. My favorite lesson to teach was on the power of choice, because to me, your choice is your greatest superpower. And the reason why it's one of, well, at least one of your greatest superpowers. And the reason why it's one of your greatest superpowers is because the only person who could choose for you is you, right? I mean, people can influence your choices, but no one can choose for you. I used to tell children, you know, I used to say, okay, your parents really, they can't make you do anything. All right. Now, I'm telling you this, and I make sure I give them a warning. Don't go home and test their gangster. All right. But your parents can't make you do anything. They are merely suggesting to you. Okay. If your mom says, I need you to go in here and clean your room, then you have two choices, right? You can either A, go and clean your room, or B, not clean your room. If you A, clean your room, you'll likely have a very good day. If you B, don't clean your room, then you're going to suffer some harsh consequences. But at the end of the day, mom isn't going to make you do anything, because in order for her to do that, she would have to physically lift your arms. Right. She would have to physically move your legs. She would have to physically do these things. And she's not going to. At the end of the day, she's telling you what to do, but you must choose. And the power in your choice is something that I wish that I had learned a long time ago. So I felt that it was extremely important to just introduce this concept to children as early as possible, right? I need children to understand that they choose their behavior. And in doing that, you're actually setting up a space for self-accountability. And you're setting up a space for self-awareness. And you're chipping away at that wretched crutch that I like to call blame, right? I like to call it blame. And one of my favorite rappers, KRS-One, he gave me an acronym for blame. He said, it's easy to blame other people for what it is that you choose to do because, which is the B, right? Because looking at me ain't easy, right? So this is part of the reason why we're blaming. But if we're instilling in our children at an early age that you're choosing this behavior, then how could I possibly blame someone else for what it is that I choose to do? So again, the concept of the book is basically just to inform children that they choose their behavior. And then just to highlight some of the positive consequences that can come from making good choices.
I love it. And again, it's just follows that thread throughout your work of empowering kids, empowering through information. It's because it is as if when they realize that they have the power to make these choices, it's so empowering. And now I'm wondering, what are you working on now? We've talked about the books and we didn't get into too much, but like you did mention, you have the activity book that goes with the two Inventor books, and you have the power to choose. What is next for you?
I'm so excited. Okay, so I have a new book that is due to be released this year. I'm so excited about this one. It's a combination of two of my favorite subjects, STEM and social emotional learning, right? So the book is titled Dandy McLaurin Has Her Say, right? And it's about this beautiful and brilliant dandelion who is upset that dandelions are referred to and looked upon as weeds as opposed to flowers. She doesn't like this because in her mind, people love flowers. They love to receive flowers. They love flowers. But weeds, not so much, right? Quite often, people will cut down a weed before it even has a chance to blossom. As a result of this, dandelion doesn't want to be referred to as a weed. She wants to be referred to as a flower. And so she uses her big and powerful voice to let this be known and to change her world, right? How many of us have been mistreated because of some false label, some misnomer, if you will, that has been placed upon us by somebody else, right? How many of us have been cut down before we've had an opportunity to blossom because of a false label that has been placed upon us, right? This book addresses that, and I'm really excited about it. It's just different from anything that I've written so far. It's spoken in the voice of, even though it's a dandelion, it's still a girl dandelion. So it's spoken in the voice of a girl. I include dialogue in this one. I'm really excited about it. It's to me, one of the best things I've written so far. So I'm really excited about this book.
Oh, wonderful. That is so exciting. And actually, you know, it ties into, I'm not sure if I can explain this well. What came to mind when you were talking about the Power to Choose book and the difference between being empowered to make a choice and blaming. Because sometimes I think it can be a hard balance. We're teaching kids about, say, you know, the way the world is and the injustice in the world and systemic racism, all this kind of stuff. It can be to kind of fall into blame, like I am in this situation because of things that are happening to me, which are very real things. How to teach kids to have to use their power of choice within kind of this framework. You know, especially for young kids, that can be kind of hard to understand, but it seems like that's exactly what you're talking about in this book. She's in this situation because she's being treated unfairly, and yet she's choosing to use her voice to make a difference. I just
Exactly.
Wonderful. I love it.
Thank you. I think that's the approach that we need to take when we talk to children about the social injustices, right? We don't want to speak to them from a place of victimization, right? Because if I'm consistently looking in the mirror and seeing the victim, then how can I see the powerful individual that is capable of pulling himself up or pulling herself up out of this situation? One thing about the history of our people in this country is that we have always demonstrated to ourselves to be exceptional individuals, right? And by exceptional, I mean that maybe outside of indigenous Americans, right? The Black American has had it the toughest. Okay, I mean, that's just me being nice about it, right? Outside of the indigenous community, Black folks, we had it rough, right? We've really had it rough. But in spite of, right, we were still able to give the world the first clock in the United States, right? And the hairbrush and the ironing board and the keychain. And we were still able to give the world jazz and blues and folk music and rock and roll, right? And we were still able to give the world all of these things in spite of. So now, if that's where you come from, right? If you're standing on the shoulders of those people, I dare you to tell me what it is that you cannot do. You can't tell me anything that you cannot do. So though we have been victimized, right? We can't look at ourselves as victims. We have to understand that we hold the power, that we choose how we want to respond to the position that we've been placed in, right? So I really want that to be, I'm happy that you said that. I'm happy that you recognize that, because at the end of the day, I really need children to understand that. Yeah, we have been victimized, but we are a mighty, mighty, mighty race. And there's absolutely nothing that we cannot do.
I love it. Patrice, it has been such a pleasure to talk with you, and what a perfect IG Live to have the week of, we're celebrating the birthday of Dr. King. And for those who haven't checked out her books, I really encourage you to go and do so. They're really wonderful, and I hope everybody listens to the message that you were sharing. It's so powerful. Thank you for joining us, and I am excited for your new book coming out.
Thank you. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.